All right, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I just want to reflect a little bit more on the atheist, secularist, agnostic. It's all the same thing, just because I'm surrounded by them. Even though I work in a Catholic school, I do cleaning in a Catholic school, it's all just secularized. So I get a lot of insights into their ideology and how they think when I just overhear them speak, see how they interact with each other. And one thing I was thinking of in particular with the atheist is, I've always wondered, I've always seen this massive contradiction that runs right through the middle of their worldview. And I wondered, how are they able to keep it all together? How are they able to perform doublethink in such a way? And that contradiction is as follows. And this is a contradiction which I brought up in my debate with Craig from Fight the Flat Earth. And essentially, the contradiction is, on the one hand, you guys will tout yourselves as, or present yourselves as, these empirical, facts-based, you don't believe in hocus-pocus religions and superstitions, which is totally not true. Your whole globe earth model, evolution, oh, we don't believe in these man-made books. Your whole evolution in space, you've never been to space, you've never seen a monkey turn into a man, you've only seen men or human beings give birth to human beings, and oak trees give birth to oak trees, etc., etc. You've only seen that, yet you believe in, not even books. You've usually just seen a video on Facebook or YouTube and you believe in this, but you guys nevertheless will present yourselves as empirically based. I believe in the empirical facts, only what's demonstrably provable, and this is why supposedly they reject God, even though God is perfectly demonstrably provable. We can see the evidence for him all around us. Somebody's making all this work. Somebody's behind this intelligence and order in the universe, but I digress. So this contradiction of saying you believe in empirical evidence and empirical evidence only, but then at the same time, the vast majority of secular atheists I've ever met, they all support this LTBG stuff. They believe that a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man, and they give credence to this concept of gender identity, which is completely baseless, purely metaphysical, purely theological. There's nothing in biology, if we're all about empirical facts, right? There's nothing in biology to suggest that me as a man, that there's something within me that's like a woman, and therefore we should give credence and authority, and we should acknowledge my female identity if I decide to be a transgender. So I always thought about this. I'm like, what in the world is it? I brought this up in my debate with Craig from Fight the Flat Earth, and of course, he didn't answer it. He would just said, oh, Waleed, we're allies here on this channel. If you respect me, you're not going to talk about this. And I don't respect you, not one bit. But I was just thinking, what about this? There has to be a reason. The vast majority of atheists, as far as I know, they're far left-wing. They're super enthusiastic supporters of this LTGB, gender identity nonsense, queer, whatever garbage you want to call it. And what about these two things, atheism and gender queer ideology? What do these two things have in common that they'd be willing to hold them together, despite being totally contradictory to what they claim for themselves, being empirically based and only in the science? These modern neo-atheists, they're not like the atheists of the 1800s during the British Empire, that whole Darwinian wave. They're not like that, because those guys, they were far more conservative. They were far more racially minded as well. British superiority. They thought that the English, they were the most evolved out of all the races. They were the furthest along the evolutionary chain. And chain. And these neo-atheists, they went away from that. They refused to go down that road. I'm sure, this wasn't a debate back then, but I'm sure if I brought it up to these 1800s Darwinist type of guys, English atheists, secularists, this transgender ideology, they would just call it nonsense and unscientific. But these modern guys, they accept this stuff. And again, what do these things have in common? Atheism and gender ideology. And what I've come to the conclusion on is the reason why they can't let go of this transgenderism thing, despite it contradicting their claims for themselves, is the atheist, secular, humanistic paradigm, agnostic, whatever you want to call it, this humanistic paradigm, it is fundamentally predicated upon reducing everything down to the level of man. That's what it's all about. This is the philosophy, the tenor, the flavor, or I should say the charge within them that foments this kind of ideology that they hold to. They hold to this gender stuff. Really, what their atheism is about, their secularism, is they want to bring everything down to the level of man, to the measure of man. And Rene Guénon talks about this in his books. They do not, the main impetus behind them rejecting God is they don't like to think that there's another person, or yeah, God is a person, he's personal, that there's a person, being, entity, who is in charge of their life and is in control, full control of their destiny and their fate. They're very proud, egotistical people. They do not want to admit that there's somebody else in control. And as a result of their pride and not wanting to admit that there's another in control who's far greater than them, they like to reduce everything down to the level of man. So they like to think, so me as a scripturalist, I say that man has little to no knowledge. We don't know pretty much anything. The mysteries of the heavens and the earth belong to God. They say, no, the mysteries of the heavens and the earth belong to us. We know this stuff. We know how far the stars are. We know what they're made of. Again, bringing knowledge down to the level of man, humanism, this self-worship and pride. Another thing is, even with the idea of morality, me as a scripturalist, I say that morality comes from God. It comes from the Most High. He decides. We are not in the place to decide what is right and wrong. It's God who decides what is right and wrong. And we are beholden to those principles which the Lord has set out for us. They don't like that. Again, it's bringing everything from the level of the divine to the level of man. They want to say, we decide what is right and wrong. Your own morals, moral relativism. Find your own way, your own path in life. It's not God who decides our destiny, but it's man who decides his destiny. Waleed, you decide your own destiny, your own purpose. I'm going to decide mine. Somebody else might have a different purpose. This relativism stuff, bringing everything again down to the level of human, degrading it from its divine form to its humanistic form. And this tendency to reduce everything to the plane of man, bringing everything in a sense from the heavens down to the earth, to the realm of us, it applies as well with their gender ideology. Why are they so big on this gender ideology? It's because they're taking another thing, another aspect of our world and ourselves, gender, sex, whatever you want to call it, and bringing it down to the level of man. Gender, sex is not something which God decides for us. God decided I'm going to be a man, therefore I have to be a man and fulfill my office in manhood. No, they don't like that. They don't like anything being decided for them by somebody greater than them. No, we want to make gender fluid. You see, gender is also a choice. It's also a construct. It's also something a man can control and decide. He wants to be a man, a woman, a gerbil, a string of licorice. Doesn't matter, right? It's about choice. It's ultimate freedom and emancipation from every authority. And really, in the end, they start worshiping the government, but that's a separate issue. Their worship of government as opposed to God, and it's another form of their humanism and man worship. But nonetheless, it's this emancipation of all authority, excuse me. It's the emancipation of all obligations, and just they want to feel like they're in control of everything. Even you look at these secular atheists, they think they're so, they exalt at their sciences. I'm not impressed at their sciences. Even forget their theoretical sciences, which is just total garbage and storytelling and theology for them. But even with their hard sciences, just empirical, the kind of things they do for experiment to create all these inventions, which isn't really science. It isn't real understanding. It's just trial and error. But this kind of stuff, like building cars, they love to exalt at that. Oh, man's inventions. Look at how great we are. Look at we have cutting edge technology now. We're making self-driving cars, and we're trying to do this and that, and modify the weather and change the weather and fight against global warming. And look at this cutting edge technology. It's, again, exalting at the things of man and bringing things down to the level of man. Rather, I'm just on the road right now, but I just wanted to add this in after the video. I should say that all of this stuff of reducing things down to our level, it's an expression of their tendency to worship man. Because naturally, if man is God, if I am God, if I am the master, the controller of my destiny, I'm the one who decides what I'm going to do, I'm the one who decides my purpose and all these things, then I shouldn't have to acknowledge that even gender is decided for me. I should be able to choose gender just as easily as anything else. It's all an expression of their human worship, which I think is an interesting reflection, man. So that's really what I was chewing on. I was just thinking of, what about these two ideologies, atheism, man worship, me worship, self-worship, and LTGB ideology, gender fluidity. What do these two things have in common, even though they so dramatically contradict each other? And the thing they have in common is bringing everything down to the debased world of mankind, as opposed to keeping it in the divine realm and saying that the divine decides these things. The divine is the controller of these things. So what we can glean from all of this is that their ideology fundamentally has nothing to do with empiricism. Definitely not, because any empirical analysis will lead you to the conclusion that there's a creator. There's somebody who's sustaining this entire world. It has nothing to do with empiricism. It has even less to do with logic and reason. It has nothing to do with seeing the world and honestly coming to the truth. But in fact, it has everything to do with a certain ideological disposition, a spirit they possess, which is, instead of acknowledging the heavens, they acknowledge the earth in some way, symbolically speaking. Instead of acknowledging the Lord, they acknowledge and exalt it themselves. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this talk was interesting. I hope it gives you a little bit more of an insight into how these people think whenever you deal with them in your life, whether they're family, they shouldn't be your friends, but whether they're family, acquaintances, whatever. What is the tendency, the nature of their spirit? What are they trying to do? And it's really, again, it's man worship and bringing everything down to the level of ourselves, as opposed to, like I said, keeping it up with the Most High. But like I said, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out. Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naeem, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God, while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations, our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God himself, which is why he has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this Hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative, holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled, A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it.
9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my 3 biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.